They say respect is earned, but in this city, sometimes it arrives in a convoy of black Mercedes with tinted windows and men who don't ask twice. On a bitter February evening, 26-year-old Megan Janis lost everything for being the only decent person in a room full of devils. She got down on her knees to help a helpless fallen woman, while New York's wealthiest stood around pointing, recording, and turning human suffering into content for their social media feeds. They didn't know that the woman struggling on the floor was the one person on earth who could make the wolf himself heal. They mocked the maid. 8 minutes later, nobody was smiling anymore. This is the story of how one moment of kindness toppled an empire and rebuilt it with a girl who was supposed to stay invisible. Welcome back, my beautiful family and friends. If you're hooked in and you're ready to enjoy this story, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Because tomorrow, I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one, and you don't want to miss it. Now let us begin. The invitation-only fundraiser at the Mandarin Oriental on Columbus Circle was the kind of event where even the air smelled expensive white roses, champagne mist, and the unmistakable scent of people who'd never worried about rent in their lives. It was the annual Spring Hope Gala, a charity auction for childhood cancer research, which Megan Janis found darkly hilarious, considering a single table at this event cost more than her father's entire year of heart medication. Megan tugged at the collar of her uniform. The black dress with its crisp white apron was starched so stiff it felt like wearing cardboard. She'd been working for Elite Events staffing for 8 months now, taking every shift they offered, day, night, weekends, anything to keep the medical bills from drowning her and her dad. Her feet, crammed into uncomfortable black heels she'd bought at a thrift store, were screaming at her. But she was invisible. That was rule number 1, drilled into every temp worker by Mrs. Caldwell, the iron-faced floor supervisor. You are wallpaper. You are air. You pour the drinks, you remove the plates, and you do not exist. The grand ballroom was a glittering ocean of silk gowns and tailored tuxedos. At the center of it all, holding court beside a ridiculous ice swan, was Miranda Ashford. Miranda was a 28-year-old socialite, wellness influencer with 3 million followers, a trust fund the size of a small country's GDP, and a smile that never quite touched her pale green eyes. She was surrounded by her usual pac-men in $1,000 suits and women who looked like they survived on kale smoothies and anxiety medication. "Excuse me, Rosé. Now." Miranda didn't even glance at Megan as she shoved her empty glass backward. "Of course, ma'am," Megan murmured, refilling the glass even though exhaustion was making her fingers shake. That's when the ballroom doors opened. A woman stepped through late 60s, maybe early 70s. She wasn't wearing the trendy, barely there designer cuts of the modern elite. Instead, she wore a long navy coat that looked vintage, a cream silk scarf tied elegantly around her silver hair, and she leaned on a simple wooden cane. She looked like someone's grandmother who'd wandered into the wrong building. The whispers started immediately. "Who's that? Did security let a tourist walk in? Look at her purse. Is that from a thrift store?" The elderly woman took a few uncertain steps onto the polished marble floor, her dark eyes scanning the crowd. As she passed Miranda's inner circle, Miranda extended one perfectly toned leg, subtle, deliberate. The woman's cane caught and slid out from under her. She collapsed hard onto the marble. Her small purse flew open, scattering a rosary, butterscotch candies, and a faded photograph across the floor. 3 seconds of silence. Then Miranda Ashford laughed. "Oops, somebody call housekeeping." The laughter spread. Not one person moved to help. Megan didn't think. She just dropped her tray. Crystal exploded. Champagne sprayed. Mrs. Caldwell screamed. And Megan ran to the fallen woman, dropping to her knees in the glass and champagne. "Ma'am, I've got you," Megan whispered, draping her jacket around the woman's shoulders. The elderly woman looked up with sharp, intelligent eyes. "Bambina, you're fired!" Mrs. Caldwell shrieked, grabbing Megan's arm. "Security! She's hurt," Megan shouted back. "What's wrong with you people?" Miranda held up her phone, smiling viciously. "This is going to get so many views." Then the ballroom doors opened again, and everything changed. The people the world tells you to ignore are sometimes the only ones worth protecting, and one act of kindness can change absolutely everything. Want to know what happened when those doors opened? Keep watching. Megan Janis's alarm went off at 4:47 a.m., 3 minutes before it was supposed to. She slapped it silent and lay there in the darkness of her cramped bedroom, staring at the water stain on the ceiling that looked like a screaming face. Through the paper-thin walls of the Brooklyn walk-up, she could hear Mrs. Chen's television blaring game shows in Cantonese and someone's bass-heavy music shaking the floorboards. She didn't want to get up. God, she was so tired. But tired didn't pay bills. She rolled out of bed, her muscles aching from yesterday's double shift, and padded quietly down the narrow hallway to her father's room. The door was cracked open. She always left it that way so she could hear him breathing at night. Lately, that breathing had gotten more labored, more uneven, like his lungs were working twice as hard to do half the job. Thomas Janus was asleep in his adjustable hospital bed, the one Megan had fought the insurance company for 3 months to get approved. His face looked gray in the dim light filtering through the blinds, his cheeks sunken. He was only 58, but heart failure had aged him 20 years. The oxygen concentrator hummed in the corner, a sound Megan had learned to sleep through. She watched his chest rise and fall. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3. Still here, still fighting. She kissed 2 fingers and pressed them gently to his forehead, careful not to wake him, then retreated to the bathroom they shared with the upstairs tenant when the pipes decided to cooperate. By 5:30 a.m., she was dressed in her plain black pants and white button-down shirt, the uniform base that elite events required before you put on whatever costume they assigned you for the day. She made coffee in the ancient percolator that sputtered like it was about to die, split a banana between 2 bowls of oatmeal, and left one covered on the counter with her father's morning pills arranged beside it and a note. Dad took the early shift. Your physical therapy is at 2. I'll be home by 6. Love you. M. She knew he probably wouldn't go to physical therapy. He'd been skipping it more and more lately, saying he was too tired or feeling off. But she kept writing the reminders anyway, kept hoping. The subway ride from their neighborhood in Flatbush to the Elite Events headquarters in Midtown took an hour and 12 minutes. Megan spent it reviewing the rules, Mrs. Caldwell had emailed the night before for today's gala. Spring Hope Gala. High-profile donors. You are invisible. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not make eye contact. Do not engage in conversation. You are there to serve, not to be seen. Uniform, French maid style, hair in tight bun, minimal makeup, no jewelry. Shift is 11 a.m. to 11 p.m. No breaks except bathroom. Do not eat the food. Do not drink the champagne. Smile only when necessary. French maid style. Megan closed her eyes and took a breath. That meant the ridiculous costume with the tiny apron and the shoes that were designed for looking at, not walking in. 12 hours in those shoes. Her feet hurt just thinking about it. But it paid $320. Cash, under the table. That was a week of her father's medications. That was keeping the lights on. That was buying them another month in this apartment before the landlord started making threats again. At Elite Events, she changed in the basement locker room, along with 40 other women who looked just as exhausted as she felt. Nobody talked much. They all knew the rules. You are furniture. You are ghosts. You do not exist. Megan pulled her blonde hair into a bun so tight it gave her a headache, pinned on her name tag, and stared at herself in the cracked mirror. 26 years old, working herself to death to keep her father alive. Invisible. She took a breath, straightened her shoulders, and headed upstairs to disappear into someone else's world of champagne and crystal and people who would never see her face. She had no idea that tonight, being invisible would save her life, and then destroy it completely. The Mandarin Oriental Ballroom was a temple of excess. Megan had worked dozens of events like this, but the Spring Hope Gala was in a category of its own. The chandelier overhead was the size of a small car, dripping with crystals that caught the light like trapped stars. The floral arrangements, white roses and orchids, probably cost more than Megan's yearly rent. And the guests? God, the guests looked like they'd stepped out of a magazine spread titled People Who've Never Experienced Consequence. Megan wove through the crowd with her tray of champagne flutes, perfecting the art of being present but not visible. A man in a Rolex that could have paid for her father's surgery bumped into her without apologizing. A woman with lips plump to the edge of absurdity snatched a glass without even glancing her direction. That's when she saw Miranda Ashford. Miranda was impossible to miss. She stood at the center of the room near the ice sculpture, some ridiculous swan that was already melting under the lights, surrounded by her usual entourage of sycophants. She wore a silver gown that probably cost $30,000 and an expression that said she knew it. Her phone was never more than 6 inches from her hand. Every 30 seconds she was angling for another shot, another story, another post to feed her 3 million followers. Megan had served her before. Miranda never remembered. Why would she? Megan was furniture. Rosé. Miranda snapped, thrusting her empty glass backward without looking. The good one, not whatever cheap garbage you brought last time. Megan bit her tongue and poured. Of course, ma'am. The ballroom doors opened then, but not with the usual fanfare. No announcement, no spotlight, just a soft creak. An elderly woman stepped inside. She was small, maybe 5'2", with silver hair pinned elegantly beneath a cream silk scarf. She wore a navy coat that looked vintage 1950s, maybe beautifully tailored but completely out of place among the barely there designer cuts around her. She carried a small leather purse and leaned on a wooden cane with a brass handle. She looked lost. The whispers started like ripples on water. Megan heard them spreading through Miranda's circle first. Who is that? Is that somebody's grandmother? Oh my God, did she wander in from the street? Look at her shoes. Are those orthopedic? The elderly woman took slow, uncertain steps across the marble floor, her dark eyes scanning the crowd like she was searching for someone. Her movements were careful, deliberate, the walk of someone whose bones had started betraying them. She passed close to Miranda's group. Too close. Megan saw it happen, saw Miranda glance at the woman, saw the calculation flash across her face, saw the slight shift of her weight. Miranda extended one long leg just a little, barely noticeable, directly into the woman's path. The cane caught Miranda's stiletto heel and slipped. The elderly woman gasped a sharp, fragile sound and went down hard. She hit the marble floor with a sickening thud, landing on her hip. Her purse flew open, spilling its contents. A worn rosary with wooden beads, butterscotch candies wrapped in gold foil, a faded photograph of a little boy in a sailor suit. For 3 seconds, the entire ballroom went silent. Then Miranda started laughing. It was a cruel, high-pitched sound that cut through the air like breaking glass. She covered her mouth with one manicured hand, but her eyes were sparkling with malicious delight. Oops, she said, loud enough for the crowd to hear. Clean up on aisle 5. She pulled out her phone, already filming. I think the homeless shelter is down the block, sweetie. You took a wrong turn. The laughter spread like infection. Men in Tom Ford suits chuckled into their scotch. Women in Cartier diamonds smirked behind their wine glasses. Phones came out. Dozens of them. Camera flashes lit up the woman's humiliation like paparazzi at a scandal. Not one person moved to help. The elderly woman tried to push herself up, her face contorted in pain, her hands shaking. She looked around at the circle of people filming her, and Megan saw something in her eyes she'd never forget. Not fear, not embarrassment, recognition. Like she'd seen this cruelty before. Like she knew exactly what kind of people surrounded her. Mrs. Caldwell was already rushing over, hissing into her headset. Security, we have a vagrant in the ballroom. Remove her immediately before she ruins the aesthetic. And that's when something inside Megan snapped. She didn't think about her father. She didn't think about the bills. She didn't think about the $320 she desperately needed. She just saw her own grandmother's face. She saw a human being alone on the ground while monsters laughed. She dropped her tray. The crash was deafening. 24 champagne flutes exploded against marble. Golden liquid sprayed across designer gowns. Crystal shards scattered like shrapnel. You idiot! Mrs. Caldwell screamed. What are you? But Megan was already running. Megan dropped to her knees beside the fallen woman, ignoring the champagne soaking through her stockings and the glass cutting into her skin. She didn't care. She didn't care about anything except the elderly woman struggling to breathe on the cold marble floor. Ma'am, don't try to move too fast, Megan said softly, her hands gentle on the woman's shoulder. I've got you. Just take a second. The woman looked up at her with eyes like black glass, sharp, intelligent, assessing. Even in pain, she was studying Megan's face with an intensity that felt almost invasive, like she was reading something written there that Megan herself didn't know existed. I fell, the woman whispered, her accent thick and unmistakably Italian. My hip. I know. Megan pulled off her uniform jacket and draped it carefully around the woman's shoulders. Just lean on me, okay? We'll get you sitting up. What do you think you're doing? Miranda shrieked, stepping forward with her phone still recording. You just destroyed my Louboutins, you clumsy little... Mrs. Caldwell grabbed Megan's arm and yanked her backward hard enough to leave bruises. Get away from her, you're fired, Janice. Get your things and get out. Security. Megan ripped her arm free, and when she turned to face Mrs. Caldwell, there was something in her eyes that made the older woman step back. She's hurt, Megan said, her voice shaking with fury. What is wrong with you people? She's an old woman and she needs help. She's a trespasser, Mrs. Caldwell spat. And you're unemployed. Security. Remove both of them. Two massive guards in black blazers started pushing through the crowd. The elderly woman gripped Megan's wrist, her fingers surprisingly strong. Bambina, she whispered. It's okay. It's not okay. Tears burned in Megan's eyes. They can't treat you like this. They can't just... Oh, this is perfect, Miranda cooed, angling her phone for a better shot. Fired Maid has a complete meltdown. My followers are going to eat this up. The crowd was pressing closer now, a feeding frenzy of phones and whispered commentary. Megan could see herself from their perspective, crazy girl, making a scene, throwing away her job for some random old lady who probably was just confused and lost. Let them think that. She didn't care anymore. Then the temperature in the room dropped. It wasn't literal, the air conditioning hadn't changed, but Megan felt it. Everyone felt it. It was like the moment before lightning strikes, when the air gets heavy and charged and every animal instinct screams danger. The ballroom doors opened. The man who walked through was tall, over 6 feet, dressed in a black suit that looked like it had been tailored by someone who understood violence. Not fashion. Violence. The way it moved with him, the way it seemed to make him larger, more dangerous. His face was all hard angles and shadows, dark hair cut close, eyes like chips of black ice. But it wasn't just him. Behind him, 3 more men in black suits fanned out with military precision. They weren't looking at the ice sculptures or the champagne fountains. They were scanning, assessing, counting exits and cataloging threats with the cold efficiency of people who'd done this 1,000 times before. The laughter died instantly. Miranda's phone lowered. The security guards stopped mid-step. Mrs. Caldwell's face went white. Someone near the back whispered, "Oh God, that's Tyson Walker." The name moved through the crowd like a shockwave. Tyson Walker. The wolf. Megan had heard the name before everyone in New York had, but always in the kind of hushed tones people use when they're afraid saying something too loud might summon it. He was a ghost story, an urban legend, the kind of man the news only mentioned in connection with words like alleged and unsolved and no comment. He stopped just inside the doors, and his eyes swept across the ballroom with predatory focus, past the ice sculptures, past the champagne towers, past Miranda and her entourage with their phones still half raised. His gaze locked onto the scene in the center of the room. His mother, on the floor, a young woman in a maid's uniform kneeling beside her, her jacket draped over his mother's shoulders, and a crowd of socialites with their cameras out, some of them still smirking. When Tyson Walker spoke, his voice was quiet, barely above a conversational tone, but it cut through the ballroom like a blade through silk. Everybody put your phones down. Now. 300 people moved at once. Phones disappeared into pockets and purses. The clicking of camera shutters stopped. Even Miranda, who documented everything, who lived for content, slowly lowered her iPhone with shaking hands. Tyson walked forward, and the crowd parted for him like he was radioactive. His 3 men moved with him, silent shadows that positioned themselves at strategic points around the room. He knelt beside his mother, his movements controlled and deliberate, and when he touched her face, his hand was gentle in a way that somehow made him more terrifying. "Ma," he said softly, "what happened?" Blanche White looked up at her son, and Megan saw something pass between them, a conversation in glances that needed no words. Then Blanche's eyes shifted to Megan, and she said something in rapid Italian. Tyson's gaze followed, and for the first time in her life, Megan Janis was no longer invisible. She was seen by the wolf himself. Tyson Walker's eyes locked onto Megan's face, and she felt like she was being dissected. He was reading her the same way his mother had, looking past the cheap uniform and the tear-streaked makeup to something deeper, searching for lies, for angles, for weakness. "You helped her," he said. "It wasn't a question." "She needed help," Megan answered, her voice steadier than she felt. Nobody else was going to do it. Something flickered across his face, not quite a smile, but close. Approval, maybe, or recognition. He stood slowly, rising to his full height, and suddenly the space around them felt smaller. "Get my mother a chair," he said quietly. "Not one of these." He gestured dismissively at the ballroom furniture. "Something comfortable." From the hotel manager's office, one of his men disappeared immediately. Another was already on the phone, speaking in low, clipped tones. Medical, private, discreet. Tyson turned to Mrs. Caldwell, who looked like she was about to faint. "Who fired her?" I did, Mr. Walker, but you have to understand. I didn't ask for an explanation. I asked who. His voice was still quiet, still controlled, but there was something underneath it that made the floor manager stumble backward. I did. Sir, you're done. Clear out your office tonight. Mrs. Caldwell opened her mouth to protest, then saw something in Tyson's eyes that made her close it. She nodded, her face crumbling, and hurried toward the exit like the building was on fire. Miranda Ashford, who'd been uncharacteristically silent, finally found her voice. Mr. Walker, I think there's been a misunderstanding. This woman, the one on the floor, she just walked in off the street and... Did I ask you to speak? Tyson didn't even look at her. Miranda went silent so fast it was like someone had cut her power cord. Tyson crouched down again, helping his mother sit up as one of his men returned with a leather office chair. They moved her carefully, professionally, like they'd done this before. Blanche settled into the chair with a soft grunt of pain, but her dignity never wavered. Even sitting in a hotel manager's chair in the middle of a charity gala, she looked regal. She said something else in Italian, gesturing toward Megan. Tyson nodded, then stood and turned back to Megan. My mother says you lost your job because of her. I lost my job because I did the right thing, Megan corrected. Her heart was hammering, but she kept her chin up. There's a difference. That almost smile again. What's your name? Megan. Megan Janice. Well, Megan Janice, I owe you a debt. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather wallet. What would make this right? 10,000? 20? Megan stared at the bills he was counting out, crisp hundreds, more money than she'd seen in one place in her entire life. She thought about her father, the medications, the rent, the mountain of medical bills that never stopped growing. She thought about how easy it would be to just take it. No, she heard herself say. Tyson paused, the money still in his hand. No, I didn't help your mother for money, Mr. Walker. I helped her because she's a person, and she was hurt, and nobody else gave a damn. Megan's voice was shaking now, adrenaline and exhaustion and anger all catching up at once. Some things aren't for sale. For a long moment, Tyson just looked at her. The ballroom was dead silent. Even the string quartet had stopped playing. Then he put the money away. You have a phone? Megan nodded, confused. Give me your number. She rattled it off, watching as one of his men typed it into a phone. Tyson took the phone, looked at the screen, then looked back at her. Go home, Megan Janice. Someone will call you tomorrow. I don't need. It's not a favor, he interrupted gently. It's a debt, and I always pay my debts. He turned away then, focused entirely on his mother, speaking to her in low Italian, while his men formed a protective circle. The paramedics were arriving, private ones, not city ambulance, and suddenly the ballroom was organized chaos, but controlled chaos. Tyson's chaos. Megan stood there in her ruined stockings and champagne-soaked uniform, watching them prepare to leave. She felt untethered, like gravity had stopped working properly. One of Tyson's men, the one with the scar through his eyebrow, appeared beside her. You should go. Now. Before the hyenas come back. He was right. Already she could see the guests regaining their courage, phones creeping back out, whispers starting again. Miranda was in the corner with her inner circle, no doubt already spinning this into content. Megan grabbed her purse from the staff room and walked out of the Mandarin Oriental into the February cold. She'd lost her job. She'd probably been blacklisted from every catering company in the city. She had no idea how she'd make rent. But somehow, she didn't regret a thing. Her phone rang at 9:47 the next morning. Unknown number. Miss Janice? My name is Vincent. I work for the Walker family. Mr. Walker would like to offer you a position as personal aide to his mother, Blanche. The salary is $90,000 per year, full medical benefits for you and your father, and housing provided at the family estate in Greenwich. Can you start Monday? Megan sat down hard on her kitchen floor, the phone shaking in her hand. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I can start Monday. Excellent. A car will pick you up at 8 a.m. Pack for an extended stay. And Miss Janice? Mr. Walker wanted me to tell you something. What? He said you were right. Some things aren't for sale. But loyalty? There was a pause. That's earned. And you just earned his. The line went dead. Megan stared at her phone, her heart pounding. What the hell had she just gotten herself into? The black Mercedes that pulled up to Megan's Brooklyn walk-up at exactly 8 a.m. Monday morning looked like it cost more than the entire building. The driver, a man in his 50s with kind eyes and a shoulder holster she pretended not to notice, introduced himself as Vincent and loaded their belongings with the efficiency of someone who'd done this many times before. Thomas Janus sat in the back seat, oxygen tank beside him, staring out the window like he was watching his life disappear in the rearview mirror. "Meg," he whispered as they merged onto the interstate. "Are you sure about this?" She squeezed his hand. "Dad, they're paying for your treatment. All of it. New cardiologist, medications, everything. We're sure." But she wasn't. Not really, because normal people didn't live in estates with gates and security checkpoints. Normal people didn't employ drivers who carried guns. And normal people definitely didn't owe favors to men called the Wolf. The Greenwich estate sat on 47 acres behind walls that looked designed to keep out armies. Vincent spoke into a radio at the gate, and it rolled open to reveal a long driveway lined with old-growth trees. The house, though, calling it a house felt like calling the ocean a puddle, was a sprawling stone mansion that looked like it had been transplanted from the Italian countryside. Megan's entire apartment building could have fit in the foyer. Blanche White was waiting in the sunroom, her hip wrapped but her spine straight as a blade. She wore a simple black dress and pearls, and when she smiled at Megan, it transformed her face completely. "Bambina," she said warmly, reaching for Megan's hands. "Welcome. And you must be Thomas. Come, sit. You look tired." Within an hour, her father was settled in a first-floor guest suite that had been converted into a full medical setup hospital bed, monitoring equipment, private bathroom with accessibility bars. A nurse named Patricia would be checking on him twice daily. A new cardiologist from Yale New Haven was scheduled for Wednesday. Megan's room was on the second floor, down the hall from Blanche's suite. It had a 4-poster bed, a window overlooking the gardens, and a bathroom bigger than her old bedroom. She stood in the middle of it, trying to process the fact that this was now her life. A knock at the door. "Vincent, Mrs. White would like to see you in her sitting room when you're settled." Blanche's suite was all warm wood and soft light. She sat in a velvet armchair by the fireplace, and when Megan entered, she gestured to the seat across from her. "You're wondering what you've gotten yourself into," Blanche said simply. "Yes, ma'am. Smart girl. Let me be clear. I need someone I can trust. Someone who isn't afraid to tell me the truth, even when it's inconvenient. Someone who sees me as a person, not a position." Her dark eyes were sharp. "That's rare in my world." "I can do that," Megan said. "I know. That's why you're here." Blanche smiled. "Now, the rules. You'll accompany me to appointments, manage my medications, help me with correspondence. But mostly, Megan, you'll keep me company. I'm old and my son worries too much. Your job is to make sure I don't die of boredom before my hip heals." It sounded simple enough. It wasn't. The first week was an education. Megan learned that correspondence meant coded messages about shipments and territories, that appointments sometimes involved men with briefcases handcuffed to their wrists, that the estate had a gun range in the basement and a panic room behind the library. She learned that Tyson visited his mother every evening at 7, no matter what, that he took his coffee black with 1 sugar, that he had a scar along his ribs from a knife that had come too close. She learned this because she was there, always there, in the sitting room when they spoke, at the dinner table when he stayed late, in the garden when Blanche insisted on walking despite her doctor's orders. And slowly, she realized something that made her stomach drop. Tyson listened to her. When Blanche was being stubborn about her physical therapy, and Megan suggested they turn it into a competition who could do more reps, Tyson actually laughed. When the chef prepared something too rich and Megan mentioned Blanche's cholesterol, he had the menu changed immediately. When Megan said his mother seemed lonely, he cleared his schedule to have breakfast with her 3 times a week. "You're good for her," Vincent told Megan one afternoon as they watched Blanche and Thomas playing chess in the sunroom. "She hasn't smiled this much in years." "She's good for my dad, too," Megan said. "Look at him. He's actually trying." But it was the dinner 2 weeks in that changed everything. Blanche had gone to bed early, and Megan was about to head upstairs when Tyson appeared in the hallway. "Walk with me," he said. It wasn't a request. They walked through the gardens in silence, the estate lights casting long shadows across the paths. Finally, Tyson stopped by the fountain. "My men tell me you're the only person who can talk my mother out of doing dangerous things." "She's stubborn," Megan said carefully. "She's a walker. It's genetic." He turned to look at her. "But she listens to you. That's unusual." "She doesn't listen to anyone, not even me." Maybe because I'm not trying to control her. I'm just trying to keep her safe. And that's why I'm telling you this." His voice dropped. "There are people who would use you to get to her, to get to me. Being in this position, being someone I trust, makes you a target." Megan's blood went cold. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you have a choice. You can leave now, with a generous severance and my gratitude. Or you can stay, understanding that your life just got a lot more complicated." She thought about her father downstairs, sleeping peacefully for the first time in months. She thought about Blanche, who treated her like family. She thought about this strange new world where she somehow mattered. "I'm staying," she said. Tyson studied her face for a long moment, then nodded once. "Then welcome to the family, Megan Janice. God help you." Megan couldn't sleep. She'd been at the estate for 3 weeks now, and most nights she slept like the dead, exhausted from the strange new rhythms of her life. From learning to navigate a world where breakfast required 3 forks and casual conversations involved offshore accounts. But tonight, her mind wouldn't shut off. At 2:47 a.m., she gave up, pulled on a cardigan over her tank top and pajama pants, and padded downstairs to find something to read. The estate library was on the first floor, a 2-story room with floor-to-ceiling shelves and one of those sliding ladders that Megan had only seen in movies. The light was already on. Tyson sat in one of the leather armchairs by the window, a glass of amber liquid in one hand and a book he clearly wasn't reading in the other. He was dressed in black sweatpants and a white t-shirt, the most casual she'd ever seen him, and his feet were bare. He looked up when she entered, and she saw exhaustion carved into his face. "I'm sorry," Megan said quickly. "I didn't know anyone was. I'll just go." "Stay." His voice was rough, like he'd been awake for days. "I don't own insomnia. Help yourself." She hesitated, then moved to the shelves, acutely aware of his presence behind her. She pulled down a worn copy of something by Steinbeck and turned to leave, but his voice stopped her. "Can't sleep either?" "Not tonight." "Worried about your father?" She turned back. "How did you know?" "Because you check on him 4 times a night," Vincent told me. He took a sip of his drink. "He's doing better. The new medication is working." "I know. I just..." She trailed off, not sure how to explain the constant anxiety that had lived in her chest for 2 years. "Can't turn it off," Tyson finished. "The waiting for the other shoe to drop. I know that feeling." Megan found herself moving closer, drawn by something in his voice. "You do?" "My father died when I was 17. Heart attack. One minute he was teaching me how to balance the books, the next he was on the floor." Tyson stared into his glass. "I spent the next 5 years waiting for my mother to die too. Every phone call, every time she was late coming home, I was certain." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It taught me something important." He looked up at her. "That the waiting is worse than the doing. Fear is more destructive than the thing you're afraid of." Megan sat down in the chair across from him, tucking her legs under her. "Is that why you don't sleep?" A ghost of a smile. "One of the reasons." They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the ticking of the antique clock on the mantel. Outside, the estate grounds were dark except for the security lights that made the gardens look like a stage set. "Can I ask you something?" Megan said quietly. "You can ask. I might not answer." "The scar. On your ribs. How close did that come to killing you?" Tyson's expression shifted surprise. Maybe that she'd noticed, that she'd said it out loud. He set down his glass and, before she could process what was happening, he gripped the hem of his t-shirt and pulled it up. The scar ran along his left side, starting just below his ribs and curving around toward his spine. It was maybe 6 inches long, raised and white against his olive skin. But it wasn't the only one. His torso was a roadmap of violence, smaller scars, bullet wounds she now recognized, a burn mark on his shoulder. 2 inches to the right and it would have hit my kidney, he said quietly. Another inch up and it would have punctured my lung. I got lucky. That's not lucky, Megan breathed. That's my life. He dropped the shirt, but didn't move away. That's what you signed up for when you decided to stay. This world, these scars, the kind of people who give them. She should have been afraid. Should have been running back upstairs to pack her bags. But instead, she found herself leaning forward. Who did it? A man who thought he could take what was mine. Tyson's eyes were dark, unreadable. He was wrong. What happened to him? What do you think happened to him? The answer was in his voice. Final. Absolute. Megan should have been horrified. But all she felt was a strange, twisted sense of security. This man, this dangerous, Violent man had looked at her in that ballroom and seen something worth protecting, had brought her into his home, had trusted her with his mother. "You're not what I expected," she said softly. "What did you expect?" "A monster." "And what am I instead?" She looked at him, really looked at him. At the exhaustion in his eyes, the careful control, the way he held himself like he was always ready for an attack, at the scars he carried, inside and out. "Human," she said, "just trying to protect what matters." Something shifted in his expression. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, close enough that she could smell his cologne cedar and something darker. "You should be careful, Megan Janice." "Of what?" "Of seeing me as human. It's dangerous. For both of us." Her heart was hammering. "Why?" "Because I'm starting to see you the same way." His voice was barely above a whisper. "And that's the most dangerous thing that's happened to me in years." The air between them felt electric, charged with something neither of them was willing to name. Megan knew she should stand up, should say goodnight, should put distance between herself and this man who carried violence like other people carried car keys. But she didn't move. Neither did he. They sat there in the library at 3 a.m, two wounded souls recognizing something in each other that the rest of the world couldn't see. And everything changed. Blanche insisted on coming to dinner. Her hip had healed enough that she refused to be imprisoned any longer, and when Blanche White made up her mind, even Tyson knew better than to argue. So, on a Thursday evening in late March, they drove into Manhattan, Tyson, Blanche, Megan, and 4 security men in 2 separate vehicles for what was supposed to be a simple business dinner at La Grenouille. Megan had never been anywhere like it. The restaurant was all soft lighting and French elegance, the kind of place where the waiters moved like dancers and the wine list required a college degree to understand. She wore a dress Blanche had insisted on buying her midnight blue silk that made her feel like an imposter, and sat beside Blanche at a corner table, while Tyson conducted business with 2 men in expensive suits who spoke in numbers and percentages. Everything was fine until Dominic Castellano walked in. Megan felt the shift immediately. Tyson's jaw tightened. His men, positioned strategically around the room, went rigid. Even Blanche's smile turned glacial. Dominic was in his 60s, silver-haired and handsome in that aging actor way. He wore a cream suit that probably cost $10,000 and walked like he owned every room he entered. His own security fanned out behind him 4 men, all watching Tyson's table. He stopped beside their table, his smile sharp as broken glass. "Blanche," he said warmly. "What a surprise. I didn't realize they let the help eat in the dining room these days." The entire restaurant went quiet. Tyson stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Dominic, you should keep walking." "Should I?" Dominic's eyes were cold. "I'm just making conversation with an old friend." "We go way back, don't we, Blanche? Back when she was just Antonio's pretty wife, before she started thinking she ran things." Blanche's hand tightened on her wine glass, but her voice was steady. "Domenico, you were a coward when my husband was alive, and you're a coward now. Some things never change." His smile vanished. "Careful, old woman. Your son's protection only goes so far. And yours doesn't go far enough," Tyson said quietly, stepping around the table. "Walk away, now." For a moment, Megan thought Dominic might actually swing. His face flushed red, his hands clenched into fists. But then he looked at Tyson, really looked at him, and saw something that made him step back. "This isn't over," Dominic said. "It never is with you," Tyson replied. Dominic left, his men trailing behind him. The restaurant slowly returned to normal, conversations resuming in hushed tones, but Megan's hands were shaking. She'd just watched 2 men nearly kill each other over a dinner table, and everyone else was acting like it was just another Thursday. "We're leaving," Tyson said, already signaling for the check. "Now." They left through the kitchen Vincent's suggestion and took the service elevator down to the parking garage. Megan was sandwiched between Blanche and one of the security men, her heart still racing from the confrontation upstairs. The garage was dimly lit, their footsteps echoing off concrete. Their cars were parked on the 3rd level, 2 black Mercedes waiting like patient shadows. They were 15 feet from the vehicles when the first shot rang out. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Concrete exploded near Tyson's head. His men reacted instantly. One grabbed Blanche. Another shoved Megan to the ground behind a concrete pillar. Tyson had his own gun out, returning fire toward the upper level where muzzle flashes lit up the darkness. Megan couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She pressed herself against the pillar, covering Blanche with her own body while gunfire echoed around them like the world was ending. "Stay down," Vincent shouted, firing toward a van that had appeared from nowhere, blocking their exit. 4 men spilled out of the van, automatic weapons raised. Castellano's men. It was an execution, planned and coordinated. Tyson was moving between cars, providing cover for his mother while his men engaged. But there were too many. Megan watched in horror as one of Tyson's guards went down, blood spreading across his white shirt. "Tyson!" Blanche screamed. He turned at his mother's voice just for a second, just a fraction of attention diverted, and that's when Megan saw the man on the upper level, saw the rifle, saw the red dot tracking across Tyson's chest. She didn't think. She grabbed the fire extinguisher, mounted to the pillar, and hurled it with everything she had. It hit the shooter's arm just as he fired. The shot went wide, sparking off the concrete instead of Tyson's heart. But the second shooter didn't miss. Tyson jerked backward, his hand going to his shoulder. Blood, dark and spreading fast. Vincent and the remaining guards opened fire with terrifying precision, and suddenly the Castellano men were retreating, dragging their wounded back to the van. Tires screeched. The van disappeared up the exit ramp, and then there was silence. Tyson was on the ground, his back against a Mercedes, his hand pressed to his shoulder, blood seeped between his fingers. "Tyson!" Blanche was crying, trying to get to him, but Vincent held her back. Megan ran to him, her hands shaking. "Let me see. I'm fine," he gritted out, but his face was pale. "You're shot. You're not fine." She pressed her hands over his, adding pressure to the wound. "Vincent, call an ambulance." "No hospitals," Tyson said. "Can't trust." "Our doctor," Blanche said, her voice shaking but firm. "Vincent, call Dr. Reeves. Tell him we're coming to the estate. Tell him to be ready." They got Tyson into the car, Megan applying pressure the entire way while Blanche held her son's other hand, whispering prayers in Italian. The drive back to Greenwich took 43 minutes. Tyson's blood soaked through Megan's dress, warm and terrifying. His eyes kept closing. "Stay with me," she kept saying. "Tyson, stay with me. Look at me." He did. His dark eyes found hers, and even through the pain, there was something there. Something that made her chest ache. "Told you," he whispered. "Dangerous. Shut up and stay alive." His lips twitched. Almost a smile. "Yes, ma'am." Dr. Reeves worked on Tyson for 3 hours in the estate's medical suite, a fully equipped surgical room that Megan hadn't even known existed until tonight. She sat outside with Blanche, both of them still covered in blood, while Vincent paced the hallway like a caged animal, and the remaining security team swept the grounds for threats that might never come. When Dr. Reeves finally emerged, his surgical mask pulled down, his expression was grave. "The bullet missed the artery, but he's lost a lot of blood. He's stable for now, but the next 48 hours are critical, if infection sets in." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. "Can I see him?" Blanche asked, her voice small in a way Megan had never heard before. "He's sedated. He won't know you're there." "I'll know," Blanche said, and walked past him into the room. Megan stayed in the hallway, her hands shaking. She looked down at her dress ruined, soaked with Tyson's blood, and felt something inside her crack. He'd been shot. Because of a dinner. Because some old vendetta was more important than human life. Vincent appeared beside her, holding out a phone. Tyson's phone. The screen was cracked, but it still worked. "Found this in the car. Thought you might want to give it to Mrs. White when she comes out." Megan took it automatically, then stared at the lock screen. A photo of Blanche in the garden, laughing at something off camera. The notification bar showed missed calls. Dozens of them. Messages flooding in. "They need to know he's okay," Vincent said quietly. "His people. But we can't tell them anything until we know who set this up." "Set it up?" Megan's head snapped up. "You think someone inside?" "Dominic knew we'd be there. Knew exactly where we'd park. Knew which route we'd take out of the building." Vincent's jaw was tight. "That's not luck. That's information." The words hung in the air like poison. Megan looked down at the phone again. The lock screen showed a 6-digit passcode requirement. She thought about the night in the library, about all the evenings she'd spent in Blanche's sitting room while Tyson visited, the small details she'd learned without trying. "What's Blanche's birthday?" she asked suddenly. Vincent frowned. "May 17th, 1957. "Why?" Megan's fingers moved across the screen. 051757. The phone unlocked. Vincent's eyes widened. How did you? He told me once. In the library. Said he uses it for everything important because his mother is the only thing he trusts completely. Her voice cracked. I need to find who did this. That's not your job. He's dying upstairs because someone betrayed him, and you're telling me to just sit here? Megan's hands were steady now, her fear transforming into something sharper. Show me his business files. Show me who had access to his schedule. Vincent studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. Come with me. They went to Tyson's office, a room Megan had never entered before. It was all dark wood and leather, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the grounds. Vincent pulled up files on Tyson's computer, cross-referencing them with the phone data. Tonight's dinner was on his calendar for 3 weeks, Vincent explained. Only 5 people had access to that calendar. Me, Mrs. White, his attorney, his CFO Marcus Harding, and his brother in Chicago. Not his brother, Megan said immediately. Tyson talks to him every Sunday. Family doesn't do this. Not you, obviously, Vincent continued. And not Mrs. White. That leaves Marcus and the attorney. Megan was scrolling through the phone, looking for anything unusual. Emails, messages, calendar entries. And then she saw a folder labeled MH Review that had been accessed 2 days ago. She opened it. Financial records, offshore accounts, transactions dated back 3 years, and every single one of them showed money moving from Walker family accounts to shell companies in the Cayman Islands. Small amounts at first, 10,000 here, 20,000 there, but they grew. By last month, someone had siphoned off nearly $2 million. Vincent? Megan breathed. Look at this. He came around the desk, his face darkening as he scanned the documents. Son of a bitch. What is it? Marcus Harding. He's been stealing from the family for years. Vincent's hands clenched into fists. And if Tyson was starting to notice, if he was getting too close, he'd need Tyson dead before he got caught, Megan finished. They stared at each other, the weight of it settling between them. We need to tell Mrs. White, Vincent said. No. Megan's voice was sharp. Not yet. We need proof. Real proof. Because if we're wrong, we're not wrong. But if we are, we just accused a man who's been with this family for 20 years. We need to be sure. Vincent's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then at Megan. Marcus just requested an emergency meeting. Says he needs to discuss business continuity in light of tonight's attack. He wants to come by tomorrow morning. Megan's stomach dropped. He's coming to finish the job, to make sure Tyson doesn't wake up. Then we'll be ready, Vincent said grimly. Megan looked down at Tyson's phone, at the evidence that would destroy a trusted advisor and possibly save Tyson's life. She thought about the man upstairs, fighting for every breath. The man who'd seen her when she was invisible, who'd trusted her with his mother, who'd looked at her in the library like she was something precious. We set a trap, she said quietly. Let Marcus think he's safe. Let him think Tyson's too weak to fight back. And when he comes, we show him what happens to traitors, Vincent finished. Megan nodded, her jaw set. She'd come to this estate as a maid who'd lost her job helping a stranger. Now she was about to help catch a killer. And God help anyone who tried to hurt her family again. Marcus Harding arrived at the estate at exactly 9 a.m., carrying his leather briefcase and wearing the expression of a concerned friend. He'd been with the Walker family for 18 years, had managed their legitimate businesses, their investments, their carefully constructed financial empire. He looked like someone's favorite uncle, salt and pepper hair, warm smile, expensive but understated suit. He looked like someone you could trust. Megan watched him on the security monitor from Tyson's bedroom, her stomach churning with fury and fear. Tyson was awake, barely propped up in bed with Dr. Reeves' reluctant permission. His face was pale, his shoulder bandaged, an IV running into his arm, but his eyes were sharp. You sure you can do this? Megan whispered. I've done worse with worse, he said, though his voice was rough with pain. Where's Vincent? Hidden, recording everything. Marcus won't see him until it's too late. Blanche stood by the window, her rosary wrapped around her fingers, her face carved from stone. She'd insisted on being here, on watching the man who'd betrayed her family face justice. Megan had tried to convince her to wait downstairs, but Blanche had looked at her with those dark, uncompromising eyes and said, I've been watching men die since before you were born, Bambina. I'll watch one more. The bedroom door opened. Vincent escorted Marcus in, then stepped back into the shadows. Tyson, Marcus said, his voice heavy with concern. Thank God you're awake. I came as soon as I heard. The attack, it's unconscionable. We need to discuss security protocols, financial contingencies in case I die? Tyson's voice was quiet, almost conversational. Marcus faltered. I didn't mean of course you're going to recover, but we need to be prepared for every scenario. The Castellano family is getting bolder. We need to consider, how much did they pay you? The room went silent. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. I'm sorry? The Castellanos. How much did they pay you to give them my schedule? To tell them where I'd be, when I'd be vulnerable? Tyson shifted slightly in bed, and Megan saw him wince. How much was my life worth to you? Tyson, I don't know what you're talking about. The stress, the pain medication, you're not thinking clearly. $2 million. Megan stepped forward, holding up the tablet with the financial records displayed. That's how much you've stolen from this family over the past 3 years. Shell companies in the Cayman Islands, offshore accounts, all traced back to you. Marcus's face went white, then red. This is ridiculous. Where did you even? That information is private, encrypted. My mother's birthday? Tyson said softly. You told me once I should use something more secure for my passwords, but I said the only thing I trusted completely was her. You were standing right there. Do you remember? Marcus stared at him, and Megan watched the calculation happen behind his eyes. The realization that he'd been caught, that there was no talking his way out of this. It was supposed to be clean, Marcus said finally, his voice cold now. You weren't supposed to survive the garage. Neither was your mother. Clean succession, blame the Castellanos, and I'd have access to everything while the family was in chaos. Blanche made a sound low, wounded, furious. But then this little maid threw a fucking fire extinguisher, Marcus continued, his eyes finding Megan. And you lived. So now I have to do this the hard way. His hand went to his briefcase. Vincent was faster. The gun was at Marcus's temple before he could reach whatever weapon he'd hidden. 2 more guards materialized from the hallway flanking him. Don't, Vincent said quietly. Give me a reason. Marcus froze, his hand hovering over the briefcase. Tyson sat up straighter, and despite the pain Megan knew he was in, his voice was steady. You were family, Marcus. I trusted you. My father trusted you. Your father was a fool who let sentiment cloud his judgment. Marcus spat. And you're just like him. Bringing in outsiders. He gestured at Megan. Making decisions with your heart instead of your head. The business needed someone rational. The business needed someone loyal. Tyson corrected. You failed the only test that mattered. He nodded to Vincent. What happened next, Megan would never speak about. Not to her father, not to anyone outside the family. Some things stayed in the shadows where they belonged. Marcus Harding left the estate in a black van. He didn't come back. 6 months later, Megan stood in front of her mirror at the estate, staring at a woman she barely recognized. The emerald dress had been custom-made silk that moved like water, cut to perfection. The emerald necklace at her throat had belonged to Tyson's grandmother. Her hair was styled in soft waves, her makeup subtle but flawless. She looked like she belonged in the world she was about to enter. Tyson appeared in the doorway, fully healed now, wearing a black tuxedo that made him look dangerous and elegant in equal measure. Ready? He asked. Is anyone ever ready to go back to the place where their life changed? Probably not. He held out his arm. But you're not going back as the maid who got fired. You're going as the woman who saved my life, who helped dismantle a conspiracy, who's now the head of our charitable foundation and my mother's favorite person in the world. Your mother's favorite person is you, Megan corrected, taking his arm. She likes you better. I've made peace with it. They drove to Manhattan in comfortable silence, the city lights blurring past the windows. When they pulled up to the Mandarin Oriental, the same hotel, the same glittering entrance, Megan felt her heart stutter. But this time, when she walked through those doors, the room didn't ignore her. Every head turned. Every conversation paused. Because she was walking in on Tyson Walker's arm, wearing emeralds, carrying herself like the queen she'd become. She saw Miranda Ashford in the corner, champagne frozen halfway to her lips. Saw Mrs. Caldwell working for a different company now go pale with recognition. Saw the same people who'd laughed while an old woman fell silent now, uncertain, afraid. Tyson leaned close, his lips brushing her ear. They see you now. I see them too, Megan whispered back. And I'm not impressed. He laughed, a real laugh, warm and genuine, and led her deeper into the ballroom. The invisible girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who'd learned that kindness was strength, that loyalty was currency, and that sometimes the most dangerous thing you could do was choose to see people when the world told you to look away. She'd lost everything helping a stranger, and gained a kingdom in return. Thank you for watching this story to the end. If you enjoyed this story, you will surely love the next one. It's as crazier and more intriguing as you can ever imagine, so do check it out. Click on the image showing on your screen right now to watch the next one.